Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korean prosecutors investigating former President Yoon over insurrection charges have demanded the death penalty over his failed attempt to declare martial law in December 2024. The Seoul Central District Court is expected to deliver a verdict next month. President Lee Jae-myung sat down for talks with his Japanese counterpart, Lee-Takaichi, and discussed a range of bilateral issues. He said there was small but meaningful progress on sensitive historical issues and highlighted the importance of trilateral cooperation between South Korea, China, and Japan. As massive protests continue in Iran, the death toll is rising, with at least 2,000 people reportedly killed. U.S. President Donald Trump said help is on its way and urged protesters to take control of state institutions, signaling Washington's open backing of the uprising. We begin this morning with the latest on former President Yoon Suk-yeol's criminal trial. After months of special investigation and more than a year since the martial law declaration, prosecutors are asking that Yoon be handed down the death penalty. The ruling is set for the 19th of February. Our Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
The special counsel team for former President Yoon Suk-yeol's insurrection charges has demanded the death penalty. In its final sentencing request on late Tuesday night, the special counsel sought the maximum statutory penalty for the charge of being the ringleader of an insurrection. For the charge of leading an insurrection, the statutory penalties are strictly limited to death, life imprisonment, or life imprisonment without forced labor. Prosecutors condemned the actions as an unprecedented destruction of the constitutional order. They argued that while Yoon justified martial law as a purge of anti-state forces, it was the former president himself who truly fit that description. They dismissed his defense that the declaration was merely a warning against the opposition party's legislative dominance. Instead, the prosecution concluded that the objective was to incapacitate the judicial and legislative branches to monopolize power and secure a long-term dictatorship. Emphasizing the severity of the crime, the special counsel stated that members of the public are the true victims of the event. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged. Former President Yoon was seen actively consulting with his legal team and reportedly scoffed when the prosecution demanded the death penalty. In the gallery, supporters shouted protests, with some hurling insults at the prosecution team. During his final testimony, which lasted an hour and a half, Yoon fiercely criticized the indictment, labeling it a novel and a delusion lacking common sense. Yoon reiterated that the martial law was a warning bell intended to save the constitutional order from the opposition's tyranny, denying any intent to establish a permanent dictatorship. Heavy sentences were also requested for key officials implicated in the execution of the martial law decree. The special counsel demanded life imprisonment for former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun, identifying him as a co-conspirator who virtually controlled the operation alongside Yoon. The court must now weigh the conflicting narratives. The defense claim that martial law was an act of governance against the special counsel's argument that it was a violent attempt to subvert the Constitution. The Seoul Central District Court is scheduled to deliver its verdict on February 19th. 김도현, Arirang News.
Over in Japan, President Lee Jae-myung held bilateral talks with Japanese Prime Minister Lee-Takaichi on Tuesday. The two leaders are visiting the historic Horyuji Temple today before President Lee wraps up his two-day trip by having lunch with the local Korean community. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin, who is traveling with the president, reports on the key takeaways.
The second summit between President Lee Jae-myung and Japanese Prime Minister Lee-Takaichi began with what President Lee described as an exceptional welcome. In a surprise gesture, Prime Minister Takaichi personally received President Lee at his accommodation in Nara. Lee is the first foreign leader to be invited to the prefecture since Takaichi took office last October. Tuesday's summit talks lasted nearly an hour and a half, starting with a restricted session including a small number of aides, followed by an expanded meeting and a joint press briefing. What stood out was what President Lee called a small but meaningful progress on sensitive historical issues, particularly the Chosei coal mine. More than 100 forcibly mobilized Korean laborers and Japanese were killed in a flooding disaster in 1942. Until now, civic groups have led efforts to investigate and recover the victims' remains, but the Japanese government's initial response have been criticized as slow and passive.
82여 년이 지난 작년 8월에서야 유해가 처음으로 발굴된 바가 있습니다. 양국은 동유해의 신원 확인을 위한 DNA 감정을 추진하기로 하고 구체 사항에 대해서는 당국 간 실무적 협의를 진행하기로.
And at a time of heightened tensions between China and Japan following Prime Minister Takaichi's remarks on Taiwan, President Lee emphasized the need for South Korea, China, and Japan to find as much common ground as possible and to continue communication and cooperation. The two leaders also underscored the importance of working together to maintain regional stability.
As the strategic environment surrounding the two countries becomes increasingly complex, the importance of Japan-South Korea cooperation and trilateral coordination with the U.S. continues to grow. We reaffirmed our commitment to closely align on North Korea policy, including the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
But it was their one-on-one after the press briefing that took the spotlight. Appearing in matching blue outfits, Lee and Takaichi took part in an impromptu drum performance of the BTS song Dynamite and Golden from K-pop Demon Hunters. This was a special event prepared by Japan, reflecting Prime Minister Takaichi's longtime passion for heavy metal drumming. President Lee's visit this time has ensured that the back-and-forth leader-level diplomacy between South Korea and Japan will continue under the Takaichi administration. The focus now shifts to how the two countries will build a more future-oriented, stable partnership from here. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News, Osaka.
Now, for a closer look at what yesterday's summit means for bilateral relations, we're joined today by Dr. Kim Mi-kyung, senior researcher at Gyeongsang National University. Dr. Kim, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
So this summit was held in Nara Prefecture, Takaichi's hometown. What significance does that carry, and what stood out to you the most from yesterday's summit?
Well, I can think of two reasons of the significance of the site, Nara. One is that the site seems to symbolize the importance of cultural transmission between the two countries as a foundation for peaceful coexistence in bilateral fashion. Nara was the site where Baekje Kingdom transmitted Buddhism and other cultural artifacts. And that venue in and of itself signifies that bilateral relationship can go beyond pure strategic calculation as we are so pressed by today. And second thing is that the site signifies, I think, a step that we can go beyond from capital city-centric formulaic diplomacy. So the leaders can engage in more meaningful dialogue by staying away from the bureaucratic and formalistic manners of diplomatic engagement by holding talks in capital cities.
I see. And right.
And the thing that struck out the most to me was that the two leaders worked hard to unpack and address a set of important issues during the short visit, which is just one night and 2-day visit. So, I mean, the two leaders and their teams pulled out not only symbolically significant, but pragmatic ways to address the pressing bilateral issues.
Right, and they also agreed on the importance of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, as well as trilateral cooperation with the United States. What's your take on this, and how do you see South Korea, U.S., Japan trilateral relationship developing throughout this year?
It is going to be a bit rockier than we'd like to anticipate for various reasons. I mean, North Korea's nuclear capabilities and potential threat always has been an issue for the stability in this region. So the issue has been with us for like decades. And President Lee raised the issue with President Xi during his state visit in early January. And China's response to President Lee was be patient, give it some more time. And I think that was cautious advice on the part of China to South Korea. And that same issue was raised during Korea-Japan summit meeting yesterday as well. I mean, Japan has been very concerned about North Korea's nuclear capabilities because of geographical proximity and also Japan's lack of deterrence capabilities as well. So the two leaders talked about it, but I think the tone coming from Japan would have been more concerned, and probably Japan tried to pressure South Korea to work more proactively in order to deter nuclear North Korea. And when it comes down to Korea, US, Japan relationship, I don't think it's going to be very, very easy, given two facts. One, the US administration under Donald Trump leadership has been doing some things that are actually quite controversial in the international community. And China's response to it has been critical, I think. So South Korea needs to balance between US and China in order to secure its not only survival, but success and prosperity. And in that regard, Korea and Japan need to work together. And I think that was the shared consensus and shared sentiment between the two leaders yesterday.
Right, and there was a lot of attention on whether they would address historical issues, and President Lee actually said there was small but significant progress in their discussions on historical issues. How did that play out, and how might the Lee administration's approach differ from that of the former Yoon administration?
You know, the former Korean administration under Yoon Suk-yeol's leadership was excessively conciliatory towards Japan. In very plain expression, it was almost like a giveaway. And when we take a look at the issue of conscripted workers' compensation, it was the Yoon Suk-yeol administration's proposal that South Korean companies would pool their own financial resources in order to pay compensation to the Korean victims. And that was, I thought, was not very thoughtful. And it was actually quite insensitive to the situation of the victims who fought very, very long at the court to receive justice and in terms of emotional consolation and also financial compensation. Compared to the previous administration, what the current Lee Jae-myung administration is doing is actually very smart and tactical, because Jose coal mining incident involves logistics of excavating the remains of the workers who died during 1942 flooding, and DNA analysis and repatriation of their remains to the bereaved families. This task can be done, but it also carries symbolic significance in terms of the breakthrough in addressing bilateral historical issues. So compared to the previous administration, current Lee Jae-myung administration is a lot more tactical, a lot more thoughtful, and constructive.
I see. All right, Dr. Kim, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.
North Korean leader's sister, Kim Yo-jong, has issued a sharp warning to South Korea, demanding an official admission and apology over what she calls a serious violation of North Korea's sovereignty. In a statement released Tuesday, Kim accused Seoul of sending surveillance drones across the border in September 2024, and again on January 4th of this year, calling it an illegal provocation. She said South Korea must openly admit what it did, formally apologize, and take steps to prevent it from happening again, warning that repeated violations would force Seoul to pay a price it cannot handle. Kim also dismissed any prospect for reconciliation, saying what she calls Seoul's hope-filled dreams of repairing inter-Korean relations will never come true, and that the current state of hostility will not change. South Korea's job market in 2025 remained sluggish for a second straight year, with job growth in the 100,000 range. The Ministry of Data and Statistics said this morning that the total number of people employed reached 28.77 million last year, an increase of 193,000 compared to the year before. While this marks a slight rebound from the previous year's lows, it remains well below the peak growth seen in 2022. The manufacturing and construction sectors saw a decline, shedding 73,000 and 125,000 jobs respectively. The generational divide also deepened. While jobs for seniors surged, the core workforce contracted significantly. Employment for those in their 20s plunged by 170,000, and those in their 40s saw a drop of 50,000. The overall employment rate for those aged 15 and older inched up slightly to 62.9%. Meanwhile, the World Bank says the global economy is proving more resilient than expected, despite trade tensions and tariff policy uncertainties. In its latest report released on Tuesday U.S. local time, the bank said global output growth will slow slightly to 2.6% this year, from 2.7% in 2025, before edging back to 2.7% in 2027. The bank said growth in 2025 was supported by a surge in trade ahead of policy changes and swift readjustments in global supply chains, but said the boost is expected to fade in 2026 as trade and domestic demand soften. But it assessed that easing global financial conditions and fiscal expansion in several large economies should help cushion the slowdown. It noted the resilience reflects better than expected growth, especially in the United States, but warned that growth is too concentrated in advanced countries. The bank explained that if the current forecasts hold, the 2020s are on track to be the weakest decade for global growth since the 1960s. And protests are continuing in Iran, with thousands reported killed as security forces opened fire on demonstrators. As the violence intensifies, the United States is openly backing the protests and urging its citizens to get out. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
With massive anti-government protests taking place in Iran, protesters have been met with deadly force. The U.S.-based human rights activist news agency says it has verified that at least 1,850 protesters were killed over the past 17 days, as well as 135 people linked to the government, 9 bystanders, and 9 children. The news agency added that it was also reviewing reports of another 779 deaths. As unrest spreads, the United States has taken a sharply supportive stance towards the protesters. President Donald Trump on Tuesday urged Iranians to keep demonstrating, saying help is on the way. He also announced that all planned meetings with Iranian officials have been canceled. In one of his strongest messages yet, Trump encouraged protesters to take control of state institutions, signaling open U.S. backing of the uprising. Meanwhile, the U.S. virtual embassy in Iran has issued an urgent warning to American citizens, telling them to leave the country immediately. It advises using land crossings into Armenia or Turkey if it is safe to do so. Those unable to leave are advised to remain in secure locations and stock up on essential items including food, water, medication, and other necessities. The embassy warned of violent protests amid heightened security measures by Iranian authorities, calling on its citizens to take immediate precautions. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. Amid U.S. President Donald Trump's threats to take over Greenland, the territory's prime minister openly rejected U.S. control, saying the Arctic island would choose Denmark over the United States. Speaking in Copenhagen, Greenland Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen said on Tuesday that Greenland faces a geopolitical crisis and would stand with Denmark under NATO rather than become a U.S. territory. Nielsen made the remarks alongside Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen one day before Greenlandic and Danish ministers meet U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington. Trump first proposed taking Greenland in 2019 and has again argued that the island is vital to U.S. national security, citing fears of Russian or Chinese influence. Danish officials say Greenland is not for sale, but remain open to expanded military cooperation within NATO. Global central bank leaders on Tuesday publicly defended Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell after the Trump administration threatened him with a criminal indictment. 11 central bank chiefs, including the head of the European Central Bank, Bank of England, and Bank of Canada signed a joint statement backing Powell and warning that political pressure on central banks risk financial instability. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon also voiced support for Powell, reiterating the importance of an independent U.S. central bank. This follows Powell's disclosure that the Justice Department subpoenaed the Fed over his congressional testimony on a $2.5 billion headquarters renovation. President Trump on Tuesday again demanded major interest rate cuts, accused Powell of misconduct, and said that he would name a successor within weeks. Market expectations remained unchanged, with traders betting inflation will delay rate cuts until at least June. The U.S. Supreme Court on Tuesday signaled it will likely uphold state bans barring transgender girls and women from competing in female school sports. The court's conservative majority indicated the bans do not violate the Constitution or Title IX, the federal law banning sex discrimination in education. The case went to the top court after lower courts had previously sided with transgender athletes in Idaho and West Virginia. A final ruling is expected by early summer. Former President Bill Clinton and his wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, on Tuesday refused to testify before a committee investigating Jeffrey Epstein. In a letter to House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer, the Clintons called the Republican-led probe partisan and said the subpoenas were invalid. Comer said the committee will move to hold both Clintons in contempt, a step that could lead to criminal charges. Republicans say they want answers about Epstein's contacts with Bill Clinton during his presidency. The Clintons deny wrongdoing and say no evidence links them to Epstein's crimes.
I hope you dressed warmly to fend off the cold during the morning commute. It was another freezing start to the day. A cold wave advisory has been reissued for many parts of the central areas, and Paju even saw morning temperatures dropping down to below -20 degrees Celsius this morning. But the good news is that temperatures will rise later today. Seoul will climb back above freezing this afternoon, and tomorrow will feel much milder with temperatures to hover around season norms or much above the seasonal averages. And this afternoon, Seoul gets up to 2 degrees Celsius. Daegu makes it to 7 degrees under partly sunny skies with decent air quality nationwide. Meanwhile, dry conditions continue across the East Coast and the Gyeongsangdo region with strong winds. Then we'll stay above norms through next Monday. Then the coldest days of the season are expected throughout next week.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
그러다 보니까 자연스럽게 누나 발레 학원에 따라가서 누나가 하는 모습을 보니까 저도 하고 싶다고 생각이 조금 들어서 발레 음악에 맞춰서 아무 춤이나 추다 보니까 그냥 그 음악에 맞춰서 제가 몸을 움직이는 게 재밌다고 느껴졌었는지 발레를 계속 하고 있더라고요. 나이가 좀 어릴 때 제가 가진 장점이 무엇인지도 모르고 아예 제가 가진 단점도 모를 때 발레를 시작했다 보니까 제일 큰 문제가 이제 평발이었던 것 같아요. 평발이다 보니까 발레를 할 때 쥐가 조금 많이 나는 편이라 그거를 견뎌가면서 춤을 계속 춰야 했던 거 그게 가장 극복하기 힘들었던 것 같고요. 제가 다리가 다른 친구들보다 조금 두껍다고 해서 제 다리를 조금 싫어했었는데 근데 이제 로잔에 갔다 오고 나서 오히려 제 다리에서 나오는 파워풀한 힘이 좋았다고 해주시는 분들도 있다는 걸 느껴가지고 그 두 개가 가장 극복하기도 힘들었고 기억에 남는 것 같아요. 프릭스티 로잔이라는 콩쿨 자체가 학생들 사이에서는 가장 크고 의미 있는 콩쿨이다 보니 제가 그 로잔 영상을 보면서 자라왔기 때문에 그 무대에 서서 제가 춤을 췄다는 것 자체가 엄청 인상 깊었던 것 같아요. 제가 걸어왔던 길, 이게 맞는 방법일까? 근데 그런 의구심을 다 없앨 수 있게 제가 가는 길이 맞았다라는 거를 확인시켜줬던 것 같아요. 그래서 그런 감정이 들어서 조금 감격스러웠던 것 같아요. 한 배역에만 잘 할 수 있는 명수가 아니라 어떠한 배역을 받아도 다 넣어서 소화해낼 수 있는 그런 스펙트럼이 넓은 명수가 되고 싶습니다.
The Korean wave is drawing more fans from all over the world. Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% since rate in April. Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences. Like the number of hybrid cars are registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million with this locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are New Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Wednesday, January 14th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. And joining us today is Chuyeon.
Happy Hump Day.
Happy Hump Day, and also joining us with us.
Great to be here.
Great to have you. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we're right at the midpoint of the week, and if it feels like the days are dragging and feel slower than usual, it's the perfect time to take a break from work and talk about something a little more personal, our social lives. So this includes connections, the people we text, call, or DM without even realizing how often we do it. So let me ask you this, Chuyeon. On average, how many people do you stay in touch with, do you think?
Well, I don't call or I don't have any small circle that I talk. I don't stay in close contact with a large number of people. I mean, so But when I actually counted, I actually realized that I communicate with around 50 to 60 people a month on average, and that includes my family, my friends, and also my work-related people, such as coordinating my children's schedules with teachers and
that's a big one.
But that's a big one indeed, and also our writers, my co-workers, and also the broadcast schedules. So most of my communication is based on practical, my professional level, rather than casual talking. So for everyday conversations, I mainly use social media like DM, a direct message, and I prefer text messages over phone calls because they feel more efficient and deserve of time. I may reply slowly, but that doesn't mean I don't care. I do care.
Yes. That's good. I think that's so relatable. I think because social media has made it so easy for us to, like, talk to people, there's more interactions as well. So what about you, Julian?
I had no idea, honestly, so I had to look through my phone just to get a precise figure. And from what I saw, I would say about like 20 friends regularly. I would say maybe about a few family members, maybe at least 3, and at least 10 work contacts a day. But I think this fluctuates way too much each month. It just depends on what projects I'm working on, who I'm talking to, where I'm currently located, if I'm traveling. But yeah, I don't know. I think I just generally keep a few friends close and I contact them regularly. But other than that, I just think it fluctuates too much.
I think that does for a lot of people as well. So we're going to dive more into this, but first let's take a look at the video. Days, weeks, and even months seem to pass in the blink of an eye as we move between work and home, caught up in the routines of everyday life. And in this modern era, despite being more connected than ever through social media, many people say they feel increasingly disconnected. That sense of distance often becomes even stronger after graduating from college when everyone heads off to build lives of their own. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at how often Koreans are actually connecting with one another, why young people are socializing less than the older generations, and what we should keep in mind when building and maintaining meaningful social connections. As we just saw in a video, the way we connect with people today looks very different from the past. That raised an important question about how we measure connection in the first place. So there was a recent study looking at how often Koreans actually interact with others. So what exactly did the researchers find, and how did they define what counts as social interaction?
Well, there has been an interesting study about how often Koreans keep in touch with their people, their colleagues. But recent research shows that Koreans interact with about 50 people per month on average. This is based on mobile communication data. And this figure includes everybody we can contact, that is, whether close or not, which shows that frequent interaction doesn't always mean a close relationship with that person. In other words, numbers reflect connectivity, not necessarily emotional closeness, that is. So it reminds us that being connected is easy, but being close takes a bit more time.
So what's interesting is that despite being constantly connected, the younger generations don't necessarily seem interested in expanding their social circles. Instead, many appear more focused on themselves and their inner lives rather than social interaction. So why do you think that shift is happening, Julian?
Yeah, so the shift is happening because in the past, people who are more introverted and antisocial were generally less accepted by society. However, now there is a greater understanding of this. There's a trend that millennials and Gen Zers are more focused on themselves rather than external relationships. So as a result, people have been becoming more interested in learning about themselves through things like MBTI and other personality traits define how they socialize and interact with others. People have also been picking up on hobbies that focus on their inner world and their healing, such as meditation, yoga, and knitting. And there's also been a boom in Schopenhauer's philosophy because people have been resonating with the idea that one is truly oneself when alone.
Well, that's very deep. And also, being introverted or less socially active is no longer seen as something negative. And at the same time, economic uncertainty and changing lifestyles seem to be reshaping how young people view relationships. And that also shows why there's a shift between how older generations used to interact versus how younger generations view interactions. So why did this change happen?
Oh, good question. I do think that these days many younger generations prefer selective relationships. So they would like to go like selective about their social interactions. With job markets tightening and economic pressure increasing, as you mentioned, time and energy feel more valuable than ever to themselves. So meeting people without a clear purpose can feel like a waste of time and waste of money as well. So, and also I strongly relate to that. Without a clear intentional purpose, I tend to avoid those gatherings, those social meetings. And at the same time, the way we connect has changed. We do have many open chats and small interest-based groups. They are becoming more common. And I'm also part of the chat group, open group chat meetings. I have the exercise one and also the investment one as well. And even without face-to-face contact, many feel connected through social media and online spaces as well. But constant online interaction can also be very noisy and emotionally exhausted and tiring at the same time. So I do think that they prefer some simple ways and a quiet thing in their real life. So choosing fewer interactions in their lives isn't about being isolated. It is all about protecting calm and your balance in your life.
And that's why you often hear these days people say time is currency as well.
Yes.
So are there any other reasons you've noticed personally or people around you that, show why there is such a shift?
Yeah, so I'm going to be honest, I don't really see a lot of people in my own social circle deliberately choosing to have fewer social connections, but I think that's just my own little bubble. And I can really do see why, in general, young people are opting for fewer social ties and interactions. I think a big reason is not having a group or someone that you can feel like you're 100% yourself. And I think having to put a mask on can be truly very, very exhausting and takes a lot of energy out of you. Many people, like we mentioned earlier, feel like they can be truly themselves when they're alone. And coinciding this is the rise of the I live alone culture, which basically means that there are more single-person households and activities such as eating and drinking alone are becoming more normalized in our society. So overall, the number of people just doing things solo is growing, and also with life being really difficult for young people, I would say feeling comfortable and just feeling like they can just be safe in their own comfort, in their own solace is just a priority.
You mentioned the I live alone culture. I think that comes from there's a Korean TV show that's based on that, which is why people think it's no longer, you don't feel like a loser basically doing things by yourself.
Exactly.
So what stands out is that this isn't just about people becoming less social, it's about being more selective. So economic pressure, changing lifestyles, and new ways of connecting seem to be reshaping how young people decide which relationships are worth their time and energy. So we ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking viewers on average, how many people do you interact with in a month? So here's what the results showed. According to the data, 62% say they interact with fewer than 10 people, while 25% report staying in touch with between 10 and 30 people. And only a small share interact with larger groups, with 5% saying they connect with 30 to 50 people and 8% reporting interactions with more than 50 people in a month. So it's interesting to see that for the majority, meaningful interaction appears to happen within a limited number of relationships rather than across a broad social circle. And these numbers challenge the idea that we're all hyper-connected. So for most respondents, social life seems much smaller than we might expect. So to learn more about this phenomenon, we'll be speaking with a therapist, and that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
So joining us today is Yoon, a therapist here in Korea. Hello, thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So Eun-jung, why do you think many young people today are choosing to focus more on themselves rather than expanding their social circles?
Young people are becoming more selective than less social. Many are growing up under constant pressure, financial stress, career competition, and continuous comparison through social media. On top of that, there is significant stress related to how they are evaluated by others. as mental health conversations have become more mainstream, especially among young people, there has been a cultural shift toward learning how to care less about external judgment and how to be less emotionally hurt in relationships. In that context, choosing to invest more energy inward rather than constantly expanding one's social circle becomes a form of self-protection. It's about choosing relationships that feels emotionally safe and sustainable rather than draining.
I strongly agree with you, Eun-jung. So from a psychological perspective as an expert, what benefits can come from reducing the number of social interactions?
Reducing social interactions can lower emotional fatigue and social anxiety. When people are no longer constantly managing expectations or performing for others, they gain more space to understand their own emotions and needs. That outward energy gets redirected inward, allowing for deeper self-reflection and more honest relationship with oneself. For many young adults, having fewer but more meaningful connections that can strengthen self-identity, improve emotional regulation, and support personal growth.
Great. So at the same time, what are the potential downsides or risks of having fewer social connections?
The potential risk arises when selectivity turns into isolation. Humans are relational beings, so we don't fully develop or mature in isolation, while overextending socially can be exhausting, but growth often comes from navigating relationships, so including discomfort, conflict, and emotional friction. These experiences are how people learn social skills and emotional regulation and relational maturity. If social interaction is avoided too intentionally, they might miss important opportunities for this kind of development. From a mental health perspective, the goal isn't isolation, it's balance. So knowing when to protect one's energy while still staying meaningfully connected to others. So understanding the difference between healthy selectivity and isolation will be the key to prevent these risks.
I think everything you've said today will be really helpful with people as they navigate their relationships and their social circles. So thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So we've just heard from a therapist about why many young people are turning inward, the psychological benefits of limiting social interactions, and the challenges that can come with it. But as we talked about in our Zoom interview as well, reducing social interaction can also create broader problems, ones that go beyond the individual. So when social interactions shrink too much, what kind of risks can that create at a societal level?
Well, I think Eun-jung mentioned a little bit, but if social interaction decreases too much, it can lead to serious social issues such as extreme isolation. According to government data, the proportion of socially withdrawn young people has reached 5.2%, more than double compared to 2022. There are young people who rarely go out, don't work or study, and have little contact with others. Then why is it? The main reasons include difficulties finding jobs, struggles with some relationships, dropping out of school, or failing to advance academically, because in Korea we do have a high standard when it comes to academic. Well, this shows that reduced interaction is not just a personal choice, personal level, but a social problem, growing social concern. A major study in the Nature family of journals shows that social isolation is linked to negative effects of long-term health. Julian will explain later. This suggests that connection plays a very important role, a quiet but important role in overall well-being. So reducing interaction may feel comfortable, but taken too far, it becomes a social risk.
Right, so I think what you said really highlights that social withdrawal isn't just a personal choice. It can quickly become a social issue, especially when isolation becomes prolonged or involuntarily. So beyond social consequences, Julian, what do we know about how excessive isolation affects our health, both mentally and even physically?
Yeah, so excessive isolation has been proven to be very bad for our health. It has been shown to not only affect our mental health, but such as depression, but also physical health. So for example, studies have shown that among people with obesity, those who felt less socially isolated had a 26% less of a mortality rate. Additionally, research has shown that isolation during adolescence has had damaging effects on the brain. So while it's important to set aside time to recharge your batteries, it's also important to set aside time for meaningful social connections as well.
So that puts into perspective how deeply social connections is tied to our overall well-being, not just emotionally, but physically and even mentally as well. So given all of this, when we think about building and maintaining social connections, what should we be keeping in mind?
That's a good question. We should talk. We should talk to each other. You know?
Very important.
Yes, indeed. Well, social studies says like human connection matters a lot. No one is meant to travel alone through our life alone. So if you walk entirely by yourself, yes, you can be independent somehow, but you've got to, you will become isolated. Life is a long journey, and along the way, people walk beside us for different reasons and for different lengths of time for talking. Some fellow travelers make the road steadier and help you grow, develop yourself. But others may slow us down, drain your energy, or quietly lead us away from our different direction that we would like to go. So the key isn't to walk with everyone you meet, it's knowing who you can walk with without losing your pace or direction and your thoughts. So a heavy relationship is one that helps you move forward. It helps you have you develop your growth yourself, grow yourself. So if someone makes your journey feel lighter, you are walking with the right person right now.
I feel like it's the biggest task though too, and it's such a big challenge to know who the right people are as well. That's like a big challenge. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so there's actually something called the hedgehog's dilemma, which explains how to stay close to someone while also protecting your own boundaries as well. So hedgehogs cuddle together on a whole day to keep each other warm, but unfortunately, their spines hurt each other, so they have to pull apart. So they repeat this process, coming together and drifting apart until they find the right position where they can stay warm while also protecting each other from their spines. So this is a really good allegory of how we can maintain closeness in relationships while protecting our own boundaries as well. So even with people that we hold close to and we trust very well, unfortunately, the closer we get, the more likely we are to hurt them. Intimacy can sometimes weaken judgment and discernment, and the hedgehog's dilemma teaches us to maintain a healthy distance while also being more mindful of how to be polite and respect others. It's important to nurture close relationships with good people, but we should also be mindful of the ways we might unintentionally hurt people and continue communicating to build a good, strong social connection.
So not only was that really good advice, but also a very cute one as well. So today's conversation reminds us that being connected doesn't always mean being surrounded by people. What matters more is finding relationships that support us, challenge us, and still leave room to be ourselves. So whether it's a smaller circle or a wider network, the key isn't the number of people we interact with, but the quality of those connections, and also taking the initiative to reach out first. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Chuyeon.
Thank you for having me, Sujin.
For coming in, also Julian.
Thank you for also having me today.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have the best day. We are News Generation.
How to survive in Korea. Workplace. Step 1. Lunchtime. The most important morning routine is to check today's menu. Food is essential for survival. Memorize today's menu. The highlight of office life. Lunchtime. Rice in the bottom left, soup in the bottom right. The top is for the sides. The sauce and the spoon go here. This is the basic layout, but it's a bit odd to switch rice and soup. When you're done, pour the leftovers into the soup bowl. It doesn't look that appetizing, so wait until others are done eating. Step 2. Neng, nep, nenep. These are the most used expressions at work. Choose the most appropriate form. Neng, nep, nenep. Remember that the formal ne can sound a bit stiff. Did you just say yes? Absolutely not acceptable. You want to find the right word for the right occasion. Step 3. Desteria. Desteria is the oasis in the desert. Show them your character. If you're not the diligent type, get a stooky plant. Work is tough. Laugh and the whole world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone. Stay put, like the stooky that survives in the desert. Hang in there until the end. Of course, you can always quit. You matter more than anything else. Step 4. Survival kit. Every worker needs a survival kit. Survival kit level 1. This position gets the most exposure. Grab one when you need a sugar boost. Always keep a few treats you can offer your co-workers. Survival kit level 2. These are for hunger pangs before and after a meal. You'll need them when you take a coffee break with your office buddies. Survival kit level 3. Trash talking your boss with your soulmate. Did you survive in the workplace? Office romance? Be careful. Even the photocopier knows all the gossip.